Welcome to Podcasting Smarter, the podcast for podcasters by podcasters. Podcasting Smarter is the official podcast from Podbean, featuring podcasting interviews, best practices, and helpful tips. We're here to give you the tools, resources, product updates, and news to help you get started podcasting and keep your podcast growing.
Well, hello. We are so excited that you're joining us here today. Welcome. Welcome. My name is Norma Jean Belenke. I'm the head of events here at Podbean, and we have a really special event for you today all about ads. So if you've ever thought, how do I buy an ad on a podcast? How do I make a podcast ad? How do podcast ads get where they are onto podcasts? We are here to talk all about that today. We've got some sample podcast ads. We're going to talk about how they're made, heaps and heaps of good stuff. So I'm going to read our brief intro and we'll get started. And before that, let me just introduce my colleagues. We're joined today by Roni Gosch, who is our podcast specialist here at Podbean, and Mark Pafume, who's our VP of Sales and Marketing. So I'm going to read our brief intro and then here we go. Welcome back, everyone, to Podcasting Smarter and our August live podcast advertising event, From Idea to Airwaves, a step-by-step guide to creating effective ads and successfully placing them on podcasts. And we're joined today by our podcast specialist, Roni Gosch, and VP of Marketing and Sales, Mark Pafume. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Podcasting Smarter has live stream sessions and events like this one with top podcasters and podcasting experts. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Podcasting Smarter podcast, so make sure to check that out. You can watch all of our previous events on Podbean's YouTube channel, where we have resources on ads, resources for podcasters, businesses, and brands. Podcasting Smarter is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 640,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. And now we'll get started. Hey, Roni. Hey, Mark. How's it going?
Hey,
How's it going?
Good. I think we're all just so excited to be here. Podcast advertising is one of those things that it's not going away. It's only getting bigger and bigger. So first off, I want to talk to you both about how podcast advertising has evolved, because in the last few years, it's something that's really taken off. So Roni, tell us a little bit about the evolution of podcast ads that you've seen just in the last few years.
One of the biggest key things that I've seen is the growth of the host read ad, where more and more advertisers are reaching out to the actual podcast hosts themselves to say, hey, you really have this good energy with your audience. And instead of just like cutting through that with our 30-second ad with this coupon code, we'd love if you could read it in your voice or do your spin on this particular ad and really reach out to your audience that way and work with us in that regard. And so it's really fun to see how some of the different podcasters have taken onto that, where they really tell a good story with the ad, or they really just dive into it. And with that, you really get to use the podcaster's trust or work with the podcaster's trust with their audience to make your ad work.
Absolutely. And on the host read side, the audience is tuned in because they like the host already, right? That trust is there. And when the host tries the product and they personally can recommend it, it's something where it's saying, hey, I know you like the show. I know that you may trust my taste in whatever it is, right? Vitamins or whatever the product is. And so it's something where they can say, I've tried this. I like it. Here's why. And this is a company and this is a brand that supports the show that you love. It's helping create this content. So I think that's a really important aspect as well. And Mark, I want to check in with you about what are some key reasons why podcast advertising stands out amongst different advertising mediums as well.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because that host read side of things has really been where podcast advertising got its start, and then now it's where it's really evolved into. But along that, we've come out of the Wild West days of early podcasting, everybody just baking their ads in, reading their scripts live into the recordings, and into real technologies for dynamic ad insertion, where you can change up what ads are in your back catalog, and that opens up a lot of possibilities for some other avenues to get ads into your podcast as well. But what they all have in common is that they meet people where they're excited about listening and they're highly engaged already with a high level of trust. I think, Roni, you said that here just a second ago. You're here because you love my podcast, me. And so whether it's a sponsored ad that's showing up on my podcast, or even better, a host read ad, it's generally regarded in a more intimate, highly trust way than in a lot of other media.
Yeah, absolutely. And podcast listeners are, I think, more aware that, hey, these ads support the podcast that I love, right? So if you're an advertiser or you have a small business, or even if you're a podcast looking to advertise on other podcasts to grow your show, it's something where people aren't going to be turned off. Oh, it's an ad. They're going to say, okay, hey, this is supporting the podcast that I love. Maybe this is a product that's directly endorsed by the host. There's so many reasons why they would have compelling reasons to engage with your brand or your product as well. So
I was gonna say there's an
that's a
absolute
really
transference of, oh, sorry.
yeah, no, absolute transference. Absolutely
Yeah.
of trust. Yeah. And we're going to distribute everybody who's registered. And if you haven't registered, you're watching the replay on YouTube, you can always email us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. But we're going to send out our advertising cheat sheet because Mark, you threw in a couple of terms there like baked in, dynamic insertion, and we're going to break those down and explain what they are in that ad cheat sheet. So we also, if you check out last month's ads boot camp, we also go into that a little bit more in depth and we'll have that here for you. So just to tell you guys really quick, baked in is when the ad is part of the audio of the episode. So it's not different from advertising that's inserted that can be changed up throughout your back catalog, as Mark mentioned. And I want to talk about podcast advertisements and the actual ad now. Let's get into it because that's why we're here today. First off, I want to talk about what is the ideal length for podcast ads, how it impacts listener engagement, that kind of thing. And then we have some sample ads. We did an ad contest here at Podbean which was very cool. I'll let Roni talk about that in a second. And we've got some sample ads that we can show you guys that are really great examples of how to create engaging ads. So we're definitely going to show you that. And first off, Roni, let's talk about the ideal length of an ad for podcast advertisements.
So when it comes to creating the ad itself, it all depends on what your motivation for the actual ad campaign is supposed to be. So if you're really just going into it for like brand awareness, you're trying to get your name out there so it just stays top of mind with everybody, your ideal length is probably going to be about 30 seconds. And that's probably the shortest that you can go to really tell the story, to get people engaged and get people motivated to keep it top of mind. If you go too short, cut yourself off, you don't really get the chance to tell that story, to make that connection with the listener. And if you go too long, then you run the risk of having the listener just drop off or skip through it. With ads that have more of a direct action, you're really trying to get someone to activate more on it beyond brand recognition. That's where you'd want to go a bit longer. That's where you can say, hey, this is going to be like 45 seconds. There's going to be, this one's going to be a minute. You can go that long, but keep in mind that you have to be engaging the entire time. Your ad cannot have a slack second whatsoever, because as soon as it dips, as soon as there's just like a weird like gap, that's when people stop listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two kinds of podcast ads, right? There's brand awareness where it's saying, hey, this is our brand, this is our company, and it's just a general ad to tell you about the brand. And then there's direct response, like you were saying, Roni. And those are companies where you're immediately going to click on a link that's going to direct you to a page where you can purchase the product. So direct response and it's very clear that these are the two categories, right? You're either saying, hey, this is our brand, and then it's about when you're in the supermarket, maybe you see the brand, you remember the ad, that kind of thing. You remember some of the features of the product. And then direct response is immediately, here's the link, here's why you want to purchase it. And those brand awareness ads are typically 30-second pre-rolls. They're playing more often. And direct response, right? If you have a company that or a product that you want to sell, like online, here's the link, here you go. Those are going to be longer, right? That's where you're going to tell a little bit of the story. Here's the product. You're going to want it right now. Here's why you want to order it. This is the specific product. And those are going to run normally for about 60 seconds in a mid-roll placement. And we're using these terms pre-roll and mid-roll. Pre-roll means it plays before the episode starts, and mid-roll means it can play anywhere in the episode. We also have post-roll, but that's after the episode. So those are also going to be on the ad cheat sheet. So make sure that you're registered for this event or email us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. And direct response campaigns are tracked by actual sales, right? And brand awareness campaigns are more a part of an aggregate strategy and part of brand lift overall. So those are really important things to remember when we're talking about why you want to have the ad, right? Why you're advertising. So that's a pretty important aspect. And the tone and delivery of podcast ads is really important in capturing the attention of listeners. So Roni, we have a couple of test ads here. Let's play the first one and then we can talk about that a little bit. So these are ads made by some expert podcasters here at Podbean, and they've won our ads contest. So we
Yep.
really want to showcase the work that they put into it. And we just had them create ads for the ads marketplace, which we'll be showing you in a little bit. But it gives you an idea of what you want to put in an ad, the tone of it, some creativity that's possible as well. And then we're gonna listen to the first one, then we're gonna break them down and talk about the format, what's possible, how you can create these ads as well.
Hey, hey, you. If you have a great company, a fantastic service, or an amazing product, you need to be advertising it. Podbean offers the best advertising options for you. You can hear me right now, right? This could be your ad right now. Stop waiting and go to podbean.com/brands. That's podbean.com/brands to boost your business with podcast advertising now.
So that was a really fun first ad. That's from a podcast called Classroom Brew. They submitted, and there's a couple things there, right? When you're looking at making your ad, there's a couple things to remember. The first is to make sure the message is clear, your speech is concise, it's engaging, and that you're speaking directly to the listener.
Oh yeah, it's that one in particular. Just the way he opens with the tapping on the mic. Obviously, if you have your headphones
Yeah.
on, it's really clear. And he's like, "Hey, listen, it's okay. Yeah, this guy's talking directly to me." He's very engaging off the bat. He immediately dives into it. Like I was saying earlier, there's no slack second whatsoever. He keeps you engaged the entire time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important aspect. And also, on a base level, you want to make sure you communicate the message and that there's a call to action, right?
Yep.
A call to action is going to be here's the website, here's where you go, and that's very clear, right? It's short. Hey, your ad could be right here.
Yeah.
Check it out. Here's the link, right? And you feel like you're being directly spoken to. I love the creativity of that mic tap, just saying, hey, you there. And especially generally, people aren't listening to podcasts out in open air. You're listening with headphones. You're not listening via a speaker a lot of the time. And so when you hear that tap directly in your headphones, it's something where you're like, oh, this is for me. Pay attention. And
Right.
so it grabs your attention, which I think is really great. We're going to play a really creative one next.
Yes.
That is just, we'll talk about it after. Here we go.
3 a.m. and she was still awake. It wasn't a ghost that haunted Jane. It was something far more frightening. She had no customers. Podcast advertising is one of the most effective ways to advertise. Just like you're hearing this, thousands of people could be hearing your ad. Go to podbean.com/brands and start sleeping easy.
Yes.
Yay.
I
So
love
that
that
was
one
from a
so
podcast
much.
called They're Not Shadows. Yeah, it's such a great show. And I think it incorporates a couple of things, right? It incorporates the theme of the show. So if you're hearing that ad on They're Not Shadows, it's kind of part of the experience, right? It's definitely one of those shows where it directly and succinctly speaks to the exact message that the advertiser wants to say, right? Here's the engaging moment. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. Here's where to get it. Right. I think these are really important aspects in terms of a podcast ad and just making sure that you have just a clear format for your ad, I think is really important as well. Mark?
Yeah, I think it's almost creating a podcast if you're in that space, right? You have to have a narrative, a place you want to go, the story you want to tell, and it's got to be cohesive from beginning to end. But even the more challenging, you need to make it cohesive to the listening experience. That one, I think, did such a great job of kind of flawlessly flowing in from what the content was into the ad. And I think we're all trained at this point to just tune out when we start hearing an ad automatically. That's the guttural reaction, right? Oh, I'm on the ads. Where's my skip button? And so the more you can flow in, the more you can have your story aligned with the story of the podcast, the less that reaction is going to be. So
Yeah, and change the listener experience. You really want to keep that listener experience the same, like a cohesive one show moment. If we're talking about a show called They're Not Shadows, it's got a bit of a horror dark side, and then you're hearing an ad that really fits in with that. It enhances the experience. It doesn't take away
yeah,
from it, which is a really great point as well. And especially even if you're a podcaster looking to advertise on other podcasts, which is one of the top discoverability methods, which I may have mentioned earlier, it's something where you want to make sure that the shows that you're advertising to, you have a similar arc, right? You have a similar tone as those shows, and that when you fit into them, and when you maybe even ask their host to read an ad, that it fits within the feeling of the show, and it just overall enhances the experience. Yeah.
Yep.
We've got one more, and this was the winner of our ads contest. So I think we're going to play this last one, which is really fantastic. And then we'll talk about it a little bit more and break down some of the elements and aspects of what's important when you're creating a podcast ad.
Marketing professionals. All the cool kids are advertising on Podbean podcasts. You should too. Why, you ask? Because each year Podbean podcasts are downloaded millions of times, and those loyal listeners are ready to be loyal to your brand. Go to podbean.com/brands. That's podbean.com/brands to be cool like us and boost your business. Podbean. Real cool.
I love that one so much.
It's so good. It's so good. And that's from the Novice to Pro VO podcast. And they're a phenomenal podcast. It's really about voiceover art. So you really hear the professionalism there. And it's just so direct. Roni, I'd love for you to share what you love about the ad.
I love the fact that he's trying to appeal to your sense of, oh, hey, if I don't do this, I'm going to be missing out, like your sense of FOMO, but not like in a, oh, you're lame if you don't do this, or, oh, everybody's doing it but you. It's, no, join what the cool kids are doing. He says it in such a cool, confident tone that it makes you want to engage and, okay, yeah, I want to see where he's going with this. I want to participate in what he's got going on. If he was even like 10% more like over enthusiastic or too cocky for it, it definitely wouldn't have worked as well as it does.
Yeah. And I think creating a sense of urgency, that's a really important aspect as well, right? Hey, don't miss out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that he does it with a little bit of a wink too. I think that in podcasting, you have an opportunity where there's more of a personal engagement. It's more intimate than a lot of those other media. And you can take advantage of that to a certain degree and have a conversation directly with your target audience that is a little bit more cheeky if you need it to be. And it can help you stand out. And anyway, it's a fun place to advertise because you can do more, I think, in podcasting that way than you could in more traditional media.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much creativity there. And it's also something where, even if you're alluding to something, and we've talked about this before at Podbean, even if you're alluding to something, people are creating the whole experience in their mind. So if they're hearing something, they're going to imagine what it looks like, right?
Yep.
They're going to, sometimes there's those moments where you can hint at things, or it's really, like you said, like that bit of a wink, which is really fun. So in terms of creating the ad, I want to talk a little bit about this with you guys as well. The first thing to do really is to have the message that you want to communicate and to create a script. It seems like a lot of ads, when you hear them, they're off the cuff, but they're really not.
That's the secret, right? To make it sound like it's impromptu, but really make sure you have your message. And that takes it's a balance of having the direction you want to go, not always having a full script. It depends on where it's what your goals are, right? If you have a very clear, direct conversion that you want to make sure people understand point by point, a full script is great. But sometimes in podcasting in particular, it's useful to have an outline to make sure that you're following the arc of your story, but to keep it a little bit conversational and more impromptu. And it's hard to get that if you do a strict word by word reading, but even if you're going to go conversational, definitely have your points, every point you want to hit within that ad and the timing of that lined out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Roni?
Yeah, no, when it comes to making the ad, I'm firmly in the camp of if you want it to sound as smooth and as conversational as possible, regardless of if you're doing something host read, something dynamically inserted, you definitely want a script. Maybe once in a blue moon, you might want to go off the cuff, ad lib something if there was like an interesting quote from your interview guest that you were doing and you want to naturally lead it into something. But I think that with a script, you have the chance to say it over and over to figure out the best iteration of something. Because when you're creating the script and you're creating the ad, you really want to read it out loud as you're doing it, just so you hear how it sounds like in your voice, how it's going to sound in somebody else's voice, to make sure that when you're writing it out, it's going to sound good when it's spoken aloud.
Yeah, I'm team script, definitely, Roni. I'd say I have to agree with you there. But to be fair, Mark, I think the great thing about podcasting is you can always edit. So a lot of the time, when you have that fresh energy and things are off the cuff, that is maybe the final take that you end up using. And so it's important to remember to experiment as well, right? Let yourself have a couple of those takes where you're throwing caution to the wind and you see what comes out. And a lot of the time, that can be the ad that you run with because you're not so in your head about it as well. And in terms of the format, like we were saying, it's important to know the overall arc of what you want to say. Number one, have something that's going to grab attention, whether it's that mic tap or whether it's a scream or a horror moment. And then saying, hey, what is the problem that this product solves? Right. And then what is the product? How does it solve the problem? And then where can you find it? So it's a very simple kind of 4-step attention. Why do you want this? Here's what it is. Here's where you get it. And so I think that's really important in terms of creating an ad and just make sure that you fit within the time frame, right? So number one is whether you're doing a 30-second or a 60-second, you want to just think about, okay, how long does it take me to read this and practice it, right?
Oh
Or
yeah.
and even if it's something where like you're hiring a voiceover artist or something like that, read it yourself and time yourself so you know how long it takes to read. Because a lot of the time, there's so much stuff you want to put into an ad, right? And then when you do put it into an ad, it goes on longer than it should.
Gonna say 30 seconds is so long and so short at the same time. You don't realize it until you're like, okay, that's the benchmark. And it's either too long and you're struggling with how you want to fill it out, or it's too short and you're just like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really important aspect. And next, I want to talk about tone because tone and delivery are really important as well. And we touched on this, Mark, when you were saying about the no script thing, right? It's about feeling like, hey, this is coming off really casual or whatever the tone is, right? Whether it's, oh, this is a horror podcast and I'm like telling it as part of the story, right? Or whether it's like, hey, pay attention. Here's the mic tap. But I think it's something where you want to make sure that the tone of your ad is relaying the message. Because a lot of the time, maybe you're running the same host read ad on a few shows. So you may not be able to specifically match the tone of the ad to all of the different podcasts that you're advertising it on. But you do want to make sure that it matches the tone of your desired audience and the message that you're trying to convey.
Oh yeah, and one thing to also keep in mind is that when you're creating your ad, it's going to be somebody's first impression of your product, your podcast. So you want the tone of the ad to convey the tone that they're going to find with whatever you're advertising. So if you're doing like a comedy show and you want to put an ad for a comedy show, you're obviously not going to make it super dry like it's an ad for 2020.
Yeah. It's not going to be investigative journalism if it's for comedy. Exactly.
Exactly.
So I think it's definitely important to relay the tone within there as well. And next, I think I want to talk about targeting the right podcast. Like you were saying, Roni, and I think we can really easily speak to this coming from directly comedy to 2020 moment. Identifying the right podcast that you want to advertise on, right? Because if you're a comedy podcast, you don't want to advertise on maybe true crime, right? Or on a news podcast or on a sports podcast. You want to find other comedy podcasts where that's your audience, right? If you have a specific product, maybe like I said, a vitamin company, you maybe want to advertise on podcasts that are health related, right? That are into wellness versus maybe a different genre. So I think that's a really important aspect as well. And how can businesses identify the podcasts overall in terms of the genres that align with their target audience interests? Mark, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. It really starts with creating the persona of who you want to target as a holistic person. So for instance, we did some ads recently where we wanted to target executives. And so the obvious choice is go hit the business and entrepreneurial podcasts. But the less obvious choice when you start viewing them holistically as a person is, okay, what are these people doing in their free time? A lot of people listen to podcasts not for work and try to escape that work. So you're targeting executives, you might want to be targeting golf podcasts and that kind of thing. Or if your true crime is big with women. And so if you have like mothers that you want to target, then true crime podcasts are a great place to be. So part of it is building a holistic persona so that you can make sure you're getting that reach of people where they're listening, even if they're not doing it in the capacity in which you're normally going to approach them. And then finding those podcasts then just becomes the simplest thing to do is just search out by genre and podcasts have a tag that gives you a category for each of them. And it makes that searching really simple as far as, okay, I know this is the type of podcast that my audience is going to be listening to. And we have some great tools. I know Ronnie's going to get through there in a second to show you. But you search out the tag, you find some that look intriguing. We also have some good tools that let you listen to them, get some samples to make sure they match the tone of what you're wanting to do. And yeah, as much as I'd like to make it sound like it's rocket science, it's really just think about the whole person that you're going to be targeting and then search for the terms that you think would be appealing to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And we use the holistic persona a lot at Podbean, but we call it avatar, Ronnie.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Our audience avatar. For all of our friends who are going to be joining us at Podcast Movement, we are actually giving a talk on audience avatars and how to create the audience avatar for your podcast. I say we, I mean me. I'm going to be the one on stage. Sorry, guys.
No, I think it'll be exciting. And we'll have the link here in the description for today's episode. We'll pop that in as well. So for everybody out there watching, if you do want to register for Podcast Movement, make sure to catch Ronnie's session, because it is really important to figure out who your audience avatar is, because Mark said it may not be a direct subject match. It may be a match where, hey, CEOs like golf.
Right.
Surprise. Right?
Who'd have thought?
And so I think it's something where, when you're thinking about your ideal audience member, they're a whole person. They're not just somebody who's, maybe they're obsessed with the niche that you're obsessed with, but they also go to the grocery store. They also maybe have kids, have parents, have a full rounded out life. And what else is part of that life that you can speak to? I think that's a really important aspect as well. And just really quickly before we go, I want to talk a little bit about how to measure the performance of your ad as well. Because once you've run the ad, how many times it's played, what are some things to look for in terms of measuring the success of the ad?
So
Ronnie?
we offer a lot of great tools to see how the ad performed on a just service basis. So how many ads were served, what those impressions, where was it seen? But the other thing I was going to say is there are a lot of tools out there that allow you some more direct attribution. We definitely don't have time to go into the full breadth of them, but everything from using vanity URLs. So go to podbean.com/podcasting smarter, or you can use coupon codes, like use coupon code July 23 for a discount. Those things for direct response ads are really useful in the podcasting space. I stole those from the radio space, right? That's where a lot of our ideas came from to start. But the advantage to podcast advertising is then there is a whole host of digital tools out there that will allow you to see if someone was served your ad, and then if they came to your website and converted in some way, or what actions they took based off of that.
Yeah, and we'll have a link here in the description of our event today. We'll make sure that we pop that in, where we talk about some of those tools and give you links to our support here at Podbean, because we're also really known for our incredible support that kind of walk you through what that process looks like. And we'll do some events on that as well in future. So stay tuned. And we've also got a lot of resources here for you. So like I mentioned, we've got links that we're going to pop here in the event description. As well as we have our advertising cheat sheet. So if you're registered for this event, you will receive the advertising cheat sheet. And if you're not, podcasting smarter at podbean.com, flick us an email and we'll get that out to you pronto. And like we mentioned today, this event is going to be on our YouTube permanently. So you can go through it. You can have it up while you're scheduling your own campaign, and step by step, get your ads on podcasts. So that's really what we want you to help you do here, because podcast advertising is so effective in terms of brands, in terms of companies, in terms of direct products, in terms of promoting and growing other podcasts. It really is an incredible tool, and it's built in to the back end here at Podbean for you. So we've really got it all set up for you. All right, everyone, I'm going to read our brief outro. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at Podcasting Smarter for our August live podcast advertising event, From Idea to Airwaves, a step-by-step guide to creating effective ads and successfully placing them on podcasts. We're joined today by our podcast specialist, Roni Gosch, and VP of Marketing and Sales, Mark Pafume. My name is Norma Jean Belinkie, and I'm the head of events here at Podbean. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Podcasting Smarter has live stream sessions and virtual events like this one with top podcasters and experts from the team here at Podbean. We also have exclusive recorded episodes on the Podcasting Smarter podcast. If you joined late or want to have another listen to this conversation, you can replay this live stream on Podbean's YouTube channel. Podcasting Smarter is brought to you by Podbean. We're a podcast hosting and monetizing platform and home to over 640,000 podcasts. To start your podcast, head over to podbean.com today. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for more podcasting tips and best practices. Happy podcasting, everyone. Thanks so much. Thanks. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Roni. Bye, guys. Thanks for joining us for this replay of our live event episode. If you have any questions about podcasting and want to get in touch with the Podbean team, reach out to us at podcastingsmarter@podbean.com. Happy podcasting.